When the story of Bishop Patrick Marai Mungai is finally told, Nyanduma village in Kiambu County will feature greatly. It is here that the young Marai Mungai spent his early years. He arrived here in 1952 from Kidawa in Kericho County, where he was born. His father, Mungai Marai, and his family had been forced back to their native land after the state of emergency was declared by the colonial government following the eruption of the armed struggle for independence, popularly known as Mau Mau War.
I want to be very, very thankful to the Creator of heavens and earth, the God who has provided this grace. 65 years ago is when I landed here when I was a very, very small boy. I was born in Kericho, Kidawa, and thereafter emergency was declared, and all the Kikuyus in that estate, that farm, were to be sent home. So my dad came back to his ancestral place, and he brought me and others here. That is 65 years ago, and I'm so thankful. 1960 is when I left this place for Nyandarua. So I recall very much that I started going to church when I was here, and we used to go for masses and catechism classes from here. And also I remember I started schooling in our primary school here, Nyanduma Primary School, under the leadership of the late Peter Gitahi. And I'm so thankful to have come back to remind of myself the goodness of family, the goodness of relationship, and I'm so delighted. And as I celebrate my golden anniversary, I could not have celebrated my 50 years of ministry having not traced where I came from. I want to thank everyone who has contributed to my life, the primary school teachers, the catechists, the late Father Joram Dudi, and everyone who ushered me to religion. And it is why I'm saved today, because some people somewhere guided my thoughts and my values. I'm so thankful to God.
In Nyanduma village, Marai Mungai joined his larger family, the house of Magana Wakaringa. The family had settled here from Tudo area in Murang'a County.
Okay, kwa majina naitwa Rosemary Jerry Karanja. My father, late father, was called Marai Magana ama Mungai. I'm the last born in the family of 4 wives and so many children. Mimi nakaa Kimende, lakini the home is here, where we have come from. So the family was very friendly. Otherwise, tumekuwa na mtu akaenda kivyake, lakini the original home is here, Nyanduma. Tumesomea pare Nyanduma.
Nie jetagwo Mungai wa Marai wa Magana. Magana wa Karinga. Wa Bale ya Magana. Uka Magana oimete Tudo ego kwa mwena wa Murang'a.
Bishop amelelewa hapa, lakini baadaye wakahama wakaenda kutafuta green pasture. Lakini wakati ukifika wanakuja na tunaonana.
He started his school at Nyanduma Primary School. This in itself was a miracle because his grandfather, Marai Magana, despised the white man and everything he represented.
When time came for us to go to school, there was a big hindrance for any one of us to go to school, because already my grandfather had already put a curse on anyone who would attempt to go to school. In fact, he had indicated that anyone who would attempt to be able to read should become blind, and anyone who would attempt to baptize him should become unbaptized himself. And so a time came when my grandmother, the late Nyambura Marai, the third wife of my grandfather, prepared how to approach this issue, because she knew without education the whole family was doomed for failure. And so she organized about 3 people, Uka Mashua, grandfather Mashua, grandfather Moiro, and another grandmother, Waboi Moiro. And they all were timed as to when to come. And each one of them came at their own time to telling my grandfather that it was already declared by King George that every child in Kenya must go to school, and all the parents will have to pay, whether you have a child in school or not, you will have to pay as if you had a child. So they were able, through struggles and to convince my grandfather they needed to go to school. He was convinced then if I have to pay for other children's education and my children are out in school, then I better let them go. So he gave in, and so we give credit to our lady Nyambura Marai.
After the war ended, Marai's father found employment at North Kinagop Forest Station in Mutarakwa in Nyandarua County. Marai and the rest of the family relocated to Mutarakwa, where he went to different schools until he sat for his certificate of primary school education. While in Kinagop, the young Marai experienced an extraordinary event that can only be described as divine visitation.
I recall one morning, and it was a Saturday, I can recall, I was going to the garden. I remember it was Saturday because only on a Saturday a pupil could be free. And so I was going to the garden, and all of a sudden, unusual presence of God visited me. To begin with, I thought it was an animal, a wild animal, because my hair stood and there was that unusual presence. But inside me, a voice told me, this is God of heaven. I was a Roman Catholic boy, and I did not know how to behave before the God of heaven. So I thought he was, as a Roman Catholic, I was trained to do good works. So in that presence, I promise that God of heaven, if you will ever bless me, I'll build you a church. And then that presence continued. Then I thought possibly he wants a size. Then I said it will be 25 by 12. And then that presence continued. And I said, oh Lord, if you will allow me to do you that one thing, to build you a church where the father or a priest will come and offer masses and be seated at the back of that church and watch and observe you being served through the work I had done in my hands, it will be very fulfilling. And even if I'll never be able to do anything else, this will satisfy my life. That time I was 14 years and a half.
Shortly thereafter, on December 26, 1966, Marai heard the gospel and received Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. That was his turning point.
The gospel that was exposed to me was a gospel that was penetrating, dividing, and showing with total clarity that there is life after death and there is an accountability after this life. And I chose to ask for forgiveness, and I got saved. We got saved in 1966. We got baptized into this river. Isaac Kareith baptized me in water. We were so many of us. But I thank God that my wife and I were baptized the same day. Mr. Kategwa was the forester when we got saved. His wife is our witness.
Not many days thereafter, the new believer heard the preaching of the gospel on divine healing. He believed it, and a miracle happened in his life.
Immediately I got saved, the preacher one Wednesday was ministering in our home care fellowship concerning the healing. I suffered tuberculosis. I had a patient card from Nyandarua. It was number 59. And so that one evening, when the preacher was reading from 1 John chapter 2, in Isaiah chapter 53, that by his stripes we were healed, I got so convicted, I got so convinced that this God who was able to save me is able to heal me. And I believed Jesus that evening, and a miracle took place, and I got healed. And I reported this to my medical officer, Dr. Rusu. The clinic officer was Mr. Ngoku. I went to them and I reported to them that I have received a miracle, and I've enjoyed that miracle to date.
This experience led him to committing to serve God in full-time ministry.
One of those good days, as I was praying and waiting upon the Lord, I got fully convinced that if these individuals and people who came to my village to preach the gospel did not come, I would not be enjoying the grace and the salvation. And I was convinced that there was something in me that I had received that required to be shared. And so 29th of March, 1967, I told my father and my mom, Dad and Mom, I am going to be a servant of God. They never said anything because they were animist. They did not know, possibly understand what that meant. But I recall very vividly that this fire was burning in me, and I needed to make a commitment to my parents so that I can hear myself confessing and committing and dedicating myself. And I needed some witness. And I decided my father and my mom needed to be my witnesses that I'm going to be a servant of God. So from that day on, I'm grateful.
Almost immediately after this decision, Marai moved along with his family to Kamuyu.
It happened that my father was a member of a certain society that had bought a piece of land in Uasin-Gishu. That is 5 kilometers from burnt forest, a place called Kamuyu. So because of that, I moved to Kamuyu. And when I moved to Kamuyu, that was still 1967. And that place gave me an opportunity. The commitment I had made to my father and mother that I'm going to be a preacher got exposed there. And I started evangelizing that village. And I didn't have any sound system. I didn't have much training, but I had my Bible. And I was able to buy a tin, which I converted it to be a sound system. And that is what I used in Kamuyu. And the Lord was so gracious that on the 6th of October in Kamuyu, I saw my first converts. 3 young boys got saved. This is Samuel Mogo, Kibe, and Kimondo, and the last 2 are brothers, and they gave their lives to Jesus. It was October 6th, 1967.
However, life was not all smooth. The young preacher faced many difficulties.
I thought the whole gospel was full of joy, and I thought everybody will entertain and think good about us. Until one afternoon, we went to a place called Rukwini. I had about 25 of my followers that time. For unknown reasons, there was a revival in Kamuyu. So everybody, most of the people I asked to be saved, accepted. And so in a very short while, I had young boys, young girls, even some family people who believed in this gospel. So I told them, let us go to a neighboring place called Rukwini. We arrived there, but the climate was very different. There came a man who decided not to allow us to preach in that village. He was very hostile. He got a mero, what do you call a sword or a machete, and a walking stick, and got another laughter from the fence. And he decided we are not going to preach. And when he attacked me and beat me with that laughter, the whole team behind me disappeared, and I was left alone. And when there was no singing, that man told me, you're not going to preach here. But I insisted that God had called me to preach, and there was nothing to stand between me and preaching. He said, try to do that again. And I sang a song. And just on there, Tiriaru Twake, Akema Hinya Muige, Mahona, Lagia Merimo, Nakoinga, Daimono, wakati nisema daimono, aliniuguta daimono. Nikamwambia wewe Mungu hajakutuma. Kama Mungu amenikutuma uniue, wewe niue. And by this time, I'm crying and I'm sweating and I'm saying I'm ready to die, but if I don't die, I will still preach the gospel. And then he gave me the second warning. He said, leave this place and do not try to do it again. And I sang it again. That man burnt. He threw his sword up and held it and put it on my nose. I thought he would cut me. But when he did not cut me, I said, please, one thing is sure. The Lord has called me to preach. But if you feel you are called to kill me, kill me. But make sure you do not make a mistake. Unless and until you hear from God to kill me, don't kill me. But if God sent you to kill me, kill me. My blood was up. And when he was looking at me, I turned around and I faced the other direction. I said, if you are ashamed to kill me when I'm facing you, kill me now. And he did put his panga on my neck, and I felt cold, but he was not cutting me. Then I turned around and I said, the Lord has not called you to kill me. He has called me to preach. He left, but there was a congregation of more than 200 people because the whole village had come. That was a very unusual and challenging situation. And I prayed the Lord will not send another experience like that thereafter. But one woman got saved. She's still alive. She's Ruth, and I hear she lives in Jabini.
Soon, doors started opening in fields afar off.
1968, an opening came. There was a gentleman by the name of Isaac who was working as a cook in one of the tea farms. And he said, is there any way, Patrick, you can come and open a church in Nandi Hills, Savannah Tea Estate? I said, yes. And when I responded, I traveled there, and it was a long way to travel. I would start my journey 5 in the morning and get to Nandi Hills in the evening, and then travel another 80 kilometers to Savannah Tea Estate. And I would get there by 8 p.m. So we started the work. In a short while, there was a group of about 30 people who are now fellowshipping with us. And when people came to the Lord and everybody was excited, the enemy was not happy about it, because thereafter we experienced a number of resistance and a number of people ganged against the word of God, but the Lord gave us victory. I can remember one evening when we were preaching and the service was over, a group of about 20 men came and they wanted to bring the house down where we were worshiping. I was not scared about dying, but I was concerned that we had children and women in the building. And so I came out of the building and I asked them, why would you want to kill your wives and children alongside with me? And they pulled back, and the story did not end there. They had made all the arrangements to put me to the store so that they can charge me with allegations that I was giving oath to the people. And the Mzungu allowed them to arrest me and put me to the store until the morning so that they can take me to police. But on the way, I noticed that one of the men in the group had a turban, and also he was the watchman. So I negotiated with him. I said, please do not close me to the store because there is a lot of acids and that would kill me. Then he agreed, and we spent night with him at the gate. And in the morning, I was taken to police station. And I thank God. The OCPD that I found at that police station was a born-again Christian. So he understood the dangers and the attacks. So I was not charged. But finally I went to the DC, and he gave me a permit to be able to preach in Nandi Hills. And then the gospel continued. It was a very tough experience. And I'm so happy because the fellow who was leading that gang, Raphael, Knew I was putting my life in danger. They gave us 7 days. They said, pack everything you need. In 7 days, you are free to take everything you need. But if we find you here after 7 days, it means you have no other heaven to go, no other country to go. So you will join what we are doing here. So I decided not to take oath, but I decided to leave a testimony. I went to Kamoyo Center, where there were small shops and kiosks, and the school, and I had my Debe sound system. And I preached for 2 hours against oath, and I told those villagers, I am not going to take oath. I'm not going to mix up the blood of Jesus Christ with the blood of sheep. And it was 10 in the morning, and therefore I could not dare sleep there. So I escaped, and I went to Uganda, where we were refugees, and I found over 30 Kenyans whom I knew there, who had ran away before me. It was a very challenging experience. We had no money, no food, no what. But thank God we survived. When I went to Uganda, I got very sick there. Very sick. I got malaria, and I got very weak. So I wrote to my father, and I told him, in case you have any money to send me, please send me, because I'm hungry. I've been hungry and I'm sick. And I told my father, in case someone has to come, I wrote the directions. But I said, all I need is money for food. Otherwise, in case you find me alive, fine. In case I die, bye for now. And after a week, my daddy came and found me very, very sick. I told him, why don't you give me a few days to die? Then you can take my cup there to Kenya, because I don't want to go to Kenya to take oath. I ran away not take oath, and I don't want to go take oath. He promised me that he will never allow anyone to give me oath, and he will fight for me until I recover. And once you recover, it's upon you. So that's how I got home. My father encouraged me, and also the late Willie Kago encouraged me. So I came back home, but I was very weak. I could not wear a trouser. I walked for 1.5 hours to our house from Kamoyo Center, which is less than a kilometer. But I walked 1.5 hours. I thank God I'm alive today.
Soon after getting well, Patrick needed to continue with his life.
In 1970, my friends, the late Robert Jamba, the late David Njehia, Kinawa Kigathe, who were with me, demanded that I get married. Of course, I was not anticipating to get married because I didn't think Jesus would last this long. But they told me, in case he comes, fine, but if he doesn't, you still, even Peter was married. So I got this thought, and I was able to engage to Hannah Waigumo Mwendega, and the preparation took only about 7 months, and we married on the 3rd of October 1970, and we married in North Ginango Forest Station. 47 years ago, we did our wedding here. That was October 3rd, 1970. We were slightly younger than we look today. I didn't have money, I didn't have resources, and possibly that was one of the reasons why I did not get one. I was not, anxious or excited in getting married. The other thing is that I was not able to have my own shoe. I borrowed my shoe, the wedding shoe, to a friend of mine who was senior than me, David Moya Wakemende. And I can still remember Ibrahim Kionero, who gave me I think 2 shillings and 2 gallons of milk. So my whole wedding had only 1 car, belonged to the minister, and a lorry from David Njehia. And this reminds me of the grace of God. There is God in heaven.
From this humble beginning, the union has been blessed with 5 children: Sarah Nduta, Zipporah Wanjiru, Grace Wambui, Samuel Mungai, and Ezekiel Kamau. God has blessed them with 7 grandchildren. In 1969, missionary Dale Brown arrived from Oklahoma, USA, to establish the Kenya district of the Assemblies of God.
Reverend Missionary Brown came and established a district in Kenya. The Assemblies of God in America is divided into districts. So Kenya was a Kenya District Council of the Assemblies of God in America. And so we were looking for an organization. We were looking for a stable tool. And so we joined the Assemblies of God, and I got my first credential. But thereafter in 1973, the missionary Dale Brown went to Springfield and he brought the late Williams, Delma King-Sirita, and the Beggs and others, who provided a constitution, provided the structure, provided a doctrinal setting, and we held our first General Council in Kisumu, 1973, where the late Williams appointed Delma King-Sirata to be the first General Superintendent, Reverend Jimmy Beggs to be the Assistant General Superintendent, and then Williams and the missionaries decided that the Africans should choose amongst themselves one leader to become the General Secretary Treasurer. And there in Kisumu, I was elected the first African executive General Secretary Treasurer of the Assemblies of God.
Shortly thereafter, Patrick answered the call to go and lead the Kenya Assemblies of God Church in Magina, Lari Division in Kiambu District.
I am so thankful. This is KEG Church, Magina Christian Center. Back in 1971, there were 7 brothers who invited us to this place to become their first pastor. So I became the founding pastor. From this center, this KEG Magina Christian Center, many churches were born. We had so many other centers that used to attend our services every Sunday.
Patrick then moved to Bahati in Nairobi as the first Kenyan pastor in the church.
Well, I'm so delighted and so happy to find my roots here. It is 44 years ago when I first arrived here. This place, the Kenya Assemblies of God Bahati Christian Center, started in the year 1973. Our senior pastor was our general superintendent, the late Delma King-Sirita, and I was the first Kenyan pastor in this church. And thereafter, we were able to organize a fundraising, and I still remember that giving 1,000 shillings was a lot of money. My salary was 250, and my house rent was 250. And I was able to gather 1,000 shillings, and I gave.
In 1973, Patrick Marai moved to Eldoret town in Uasin Gishu County to start another congregation there. The beginning of this church was humble.
When I was 25 years, that's 44 years ago, the Lord spoke to us, Mama Sarah and I, to come to Eldoret. We did not know where we are going because we had not done a lot of research. But by God's grace, when we landed in Eldoret, the lady next to me, Mama Kamau, and her late husband, Nirango Kamau, hosted us. And they gave us this room. For almost a whole year, we resided here, and they got saved. And from that point on, this home became our church. It is from this room that we are today, that the key leaders of this local church were born. And on my right, there is amongst my first youth, Joseph. And from this room, we got almost over 100 churches, amongst them with the Assemblies of God, the Gospel Evangelic Church of Kenya, and others. So therefore, we cannot underestimate the grace of God. I would want the history to remember that Baba Kamau and Mama Kamau, who gave this hall free, who gave us permission to stay in their home for almost 2 years, they hold and they occupy a very tender place in our hearts and in God's heart.
The congregation later moved to a new site where Eldoret Christian Center is today. While he in Eldoret, Reverend Patrick Mungai served as the district superintendent of the Rift Valley and Central regions, as well as the general secretary and the treasurer of the Kenya Assemblies of God.
This is a wonderful time to be back in Eldoret, particularly Eldoret Christian Center. Back 1973, the Lord gave us a concern for this town, which was a very, very small town then. And when we had this call to come to Eldoret, we had no choice but to respond to the call of God.
Patrick's thirst for education was great.
The speakers who were invited by our missionaries from states were so elucidative. They gave a lot of clarity. They would stand there and present the preaching in such a way that you can follow, you can remember, and you are informed, and you can make informed decisions. So I desired to have this kind of information and education. And so when the preacher was preaching, and he said, if you have any needs, come to the altar. I went to the altar during our general council, and I knelt, and I prayed for only one need. I said, Lord, I pray that you never allow my grave to be occupied by an uneducated person.
Patrick's desire was to have his family with him as he studied in the US, and when that was not possible, he returned to Kenya, and after a short time, he moved to Nyahururu town.
The word of God is living. It means that is the word that was, that is, that shall be.
In 1985, Patrick founded the Gospel Evangelistic Church of Kenya in Nyahururu.
When we got here back in 1983, this town was not as big as it is now. But we want to be so grateful to this God who manages His grace in the way He wants. 1985, October 12th, is when the Gospel Evangelistic Church was birthed. And so this church becomes the first church, the Gospel Evangelistic Church of Kenya. If nothing else will be said, let it be known that Nyahururu is a great, great town.
In 1986, Patrick went back to the United States, this time with his whole family, to quench his thirst for education.
When I went to Lee University, at the beginning, I wanted to study Christian education. I took Christian education, but when I was remaining only one semester to graduate, I realized that I'd already done enough work for biblical studies. So instead of going one more semester to graduate with Christian education, I decided to graduate that semester with the biblical studies.
After graduation, he returned to Kenya and landed in Nairobi and was led to start a church in Nairobi. This was the beginning of Nairobi Calvary Temple.
When I returned from the United States, we came to Eastlands and we prayed for quite some time, and we felt led to start a church. So we went to Jericho Market. We pitched a tent there and we started revivals. It was 28th February 1990. I remember one of those afternoons, that tent could only handle 1,000. We had 2,004. The revival broke, and thereafter there was this opportunity of moving to Buruburu Phase 1, where we are, and we approached the city council. They gave us temporary occupation, and then we applied for the land, and they allocated this land, 7.5 acres, to Gospel Evangelistic Church of Kenya, and that's where we are in Buruburu.
In 1992, Nairobi Calvary Temple started a ministry at the city center.
I was very fiery because of the fact that I had rested for a few years when I was attending, the university. I felt also an urge to move to a city center where we could influence more people than Buruburu. So July of 1991, we moved to Charter Hall. We preached 100. I'm so happy.
While Bishop Dr. Mungai had fulfilled his commitment of building God a house many times over, in 2007, he led Nairobi Calvary Temple in launching one of the biggest projects in his ministry life, the new sanctuary.
Since our arrival here, we have always thought that we shall need a very modern church. And so we engaged our architect, Brother Itori, who drew this structure for us. And when we agreed that the structure was good, July 1st, the year 2007, is when we consecrated the building and we anointed the area and the construction started. This land was a dumping ground, and therefore this property has also become a big blessing to the community. You know, this project honestly speaks volumes for our people.
As he celebrates 50 years of ministry, one word keeps coming back. That word is grace. The last 50 years have been full of grace and favor from God. As he looks into the years ahead, Bishop Dr. Patrick Marai Mungai has a commitment to continue making disciples for Christ, growing leaders, strengthening the body of Christ, influencing the community through the transforming power of the gospel. As grace increases and favor abounds, the ministry of Bishop Mungai continues. To God be the glory.